Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is the game that finally gave us what we all wanted and threw Pokémon into a full-on fighting game, 2015's Pokkén Tournament.
Following that is 1998's Pokémon Red and Blue, the original catch and battle games that turned the idea of pocket monsters into a worldwide phenomenon. And yes, 1998, I'm sure there are people out there that are like, but Red and Green are 1996, and you're right, but...
We said Red and Blue.
Yeah, there's a reason we said that. But we'll learn about that soon. Yes, of course, the theme this week is Pokemon, Pocket Monsters. I think it's the first week that we've done a themed, sort of series of games with, two games from the same franchise as a whole.
I believe so. I can't think of another reason why we would have done something like that.
Granted, two different games entirely. They're not from the same main line. It's a main line and a spin-off. But of course, the big release, one of the big releases this week, because the 15th is a big release day, but Pokemon Sword and Shield, a big deal this week upon launch. So that's why we're doing it. I kind of like to plan these things out. So Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Just finished Luigi's Mansion 3 a couple days ago. It's good. Not much more to report on that, but
better than Dark Moon, though.
I mean, I finished this one. So yeah, that's about all that's been happening on my end. Been real busy on both of our ends. It sounds like.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely been chaotic, but I hope that can soon pass. So yeah, we'll talk about that more soon as well. So let's briefly talk about some composer follow-up news. We've been following different composers around the video game industry for the past almost year for this show, and we'd like to kind of keep tabs on what they're doing. First off, Austin Wintory is composing for an interactive musical video game called Chorus, and it just has officially been crowdfunded on Fig. So I wonder what that would end up looking like, an interactive musical video game.
So I don't think they have any gameplay footage. They've shown art and stuff, but the way they describe it is it's straight up interactive musical numbers, and I don't know how that'll work, and I'm very interested.
Same. Yeah, that should be really interesting. I couldn't think of a better composer for that though than Austin Wintory. And
in another more Toby Fox news, which is probably the fourth week in a row we've mentioned Toby Fox.
More Pokemon news, though.
Yeah, it's also Pokemon news. We can finally hear the track that Toby Fox composed for Pokemon Sword and Shield. So please, listen to a small sample.
You can definitely tell it's Toby Fox.
I just can't get over the that one tweet that was some Pokemon social media person had their head in their hands as they realized they would have to put his MS Paint signature onto an account with 5.5 million followers.
Yeah, no, just amazing graphic design there.
Beautiful. That man made Undertale. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to hear where it plays at the very least.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a battle song. I can almost see it being maybe a special building or something like that. Maybe
the Undertale crossover is in the game. We cracked it. Ness is in the game.
A whole bunch of Temmies.
Oh my god, can I catch Temmie and use her as a Pokemon?
Maybe.
I want this now. Make this game for me. Anyways, with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first game. What do you think? Let's fight our way into Pokkén Tournament. I'm trying to crack my knuckles. It doesn't work. There was one. Probably couldn't hear it, but hey, we'll pretend. Pokkén Tournament was originally released in Japanese arcades on July 16th, 2015. So if you're sitting there thinking, Pokkén didn't come out in 2015, you're wrong. No, we're not. The arcade release was in 2015. What you might be thinking of is the worldwide release on the Wii U on March 18th, 2016. It is a Pokemon fighting game developed by Bandai Namco and published by the Pokemon Company and Nintendo, as most Pokemon games are, or all Pokemon games are, I guess. It plays like a mix of Tekken and, have you ever played any of the Naruto brawlers or anything like that?
I've seen them been played competitively, but I have not played them myself.
That's about all you need. They play like a mix of that and Tekken, meaning that, so matches always start in what is called field phase, which is where the game plays like that. It plays like one of the Naruto games, or the more recent release, I think, would be, at least the only one that I have played that is in that style is My Hero Wants Justice, stuff like that. But then once you get closer, the match will change into dual phase, which is where the game becomes Tekken, where you can sidestep and there is 3D movement to a point, but it's not nearly as free as the field phase is. It's very interesting and weird, and I can't think of another fighting game that does anything like that. So that's Pokkén's main gimmick, really. The plot of the game is largely inconsequential, to the point where I had to go to Bulbapedia to find it. It wasn't on the Wikipedia article. And even Bulbapedia was just like, it was like 2 paragraphs and it was done. But it takes place in the Farum region, which is a new region for the series, where the league is done with sort of one-on-one battles in rounds, fighting game style, where trainers create a synergy link with their Pokemon and basically, I guess, fuse souls. It's weird. I don't know. It's never quite explained because it doesn't matter. And at some point, there's also a plot about a Shadow Mewtwo who is going around and causing trouble, and it's not a good story mode. It's not. You gotta, like, do several fights to get to the next chapter. And I don't mean like a fighting game where it's like, okay, you see a cutscene, few fights, see a cutscene. I mean, like, you have to do ranked matches in universe.
Oh.
So it's really long and not very good, even though the game is pretty good. So have you played Pokkén Tournament?
I have not. It's interesting that you mention this whole idea of the field phase, because I only know it as the Tekken-like 3D fighter, sidestepping moves, all that juggling. Didn't know about any field phase stuff. So, it is totally foreign to me as far as hands-on, playing it, soundtrack, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting game. I think I bought it at launch because a Pokemon fighting game is like something I've always wanted, right? Like, that sounds awesome. I would rather something more traditional, like a 2D fighting game, but I mean, I'll take what I can get. And Smash, up to this point, was basically the closest we got, and it had all those non-Pokemon people in it. Blah. So this was really exciting to me when it got revealed. I mained Pikachu Libre for the short time that I played it. Also played a little bit of Braixen, because Braixen is adorable and I love her. And she's literally a magical girl in game. It's great. But yeah, it's a really good game, but I don't have much more to say on it than I played it and it was good. And I wasn't good at it because it's a fighting game and I'm not good at those.
Yeah, like, it didn't set the world on fire. You'd think, like, with that idea, it would be like a runaway hit, but obviously it didn't catch me as a diehard day one Gen 1 Pokemon fan. And, certainly I'm sure we'll get to talking about like sales and reception and all that, but like, yeah, it was a game. It was a thing, but yeah, I don't know if it set the world on fire by any means.
And I think the main reason for that is it's weird. Like, even just with that field and dual phase stuff, like, it's bizarre. So, I don't know. A lot of people seem to have felt roughly the same. But we'll get to that momentarily. First of all, we got to talk about the roster, because that's the important part of any fighting game, right? It's all about the characters. And the Wii U version actually shipped with 16 playable Pokemon, being Blaziken, Braixen, Chandelure, Charizard, Garchomp, Gardevoir, Gengar, Lucario, Machamp, Mewtwo, Pikachu, Pikachu Libre, Sceptile, Shadow Mewtwo, Suicune, and Weavile. Which is a pretty interesting roster, all things considered. Suicune is especially a weird thing to see on there, but it plays interestingly. Chandelure, I think, is the one that I look at and I'm like, huh.
Yeah, of all the creatures, for sure.
I think I played a lot of Gengar, too.
Mm-mm.
Gengar's pretty cool in that game. The arcade version actually got characters that weren't in the Wii U version that were added to it as time went on, including Krogunk, Darkrai, Empoleon, and Scizor. You might be wondering, hey, isn't this missing at least one very famous fighting type group? And yes, it is. That never got resolved. There is not a single Hitmon in any version of Pokkén Tournament.
That is just foolish.
It doesn't make sense to me. There's no Hitmonchan, no Hitmonlee, no Hitmontop. It's weird. I would have taken Tyrogue. I don't know. It's bizarre to me that they made a fighting game and then weren't like, all right, what are the most famous fighting type Pokemon? Screw them. Throw them in the trash. They don't get to be in this game. No.
But Krogunk made the funnies in the anime, and when he, poison jabbed Brock, and so we gotta put him in a game. I don't know.
Krogunk is the weirdest for a reason we'll get into in a second. There's also quite a few Pokemon included that are support Pokemon. So basically, one of the other things about Pokkén is that before you start a match, you can pick a pair of support Pokemon, which are basically assists. You pick this package, and it gives you a choice. Every round, it gives you a choice between which of the two assists you want to use during that round. So all of the predetermined pairs are Emolga and Fennekin, Snivy and Lapras, Frogadier and Eevee, Jirachi and Whimsicott, Ninetales and Mismagius, Farfetch'd and Electrode, Rotom and Togekiss, Dragonite and Victini, Krogunk and Sylveon.
What?
Yeah, Krogunk was already in the game as a support Pokemon. Pachirisu and Magikarp, Cubone and Diglett, Magneton and Quagsire, my son, Espeon and Umbreon, Reshiram and Cresselia, and Yveltal and Latios. So, yeah, Krogunk was already in the game. He got in as a playable character before any of the Hitmons. I'm not telling you how to do your job, Bandai Namco, but in this case, I'm telling you how to do your job.
So, if Bandai Namco wants to take an assist trophy and turn it into a playable fighter for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate,
there's precedent.
You set the precedent there, yes.
The game was actually first teased during a Japanese Pokemon event in 2013. I remember this tease, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It was like they just showed like a quick sort of view of a Lucario facing down, I think it was a Blaziken on a street square.
Mm-hmm.
And like people saw that and they were like, are they making a fighting game? And then like the day after that, we started seeing people reporting like, the Pokemon Company just put in some trademarks for Pokkén Fighters and Pokkén Tournament. So yeah, they're probably getting a fighting game made.
Especially when you have KKEN. It's like, Tekken. Oh, okay.
That's when people realize, like, it's probably a Pokemon Tekken game. In fact, in Germany and Australia, the game is apparently literally called Pokemon Tekken. Okay. Something I didn't know.
No, I didn't know that either. Huh.
So they weren't even trying to hide it there. According to I guess 3 people were asked how this came about. According to the Pokemon Company CEO Tsunekazu Ishihara, Tekken producer Katsuhiro Harada, and Soul Calibur producer Masaki Hoshino. Harada and Hoshino were actually both producers on this game. This collaboration came as a result of them brainstorming together about, quote, new ideas of ways to play Pokemon. Or, as I choose to translate that, hey, people have talked about wanting a Pokemon fighting game since Gen 2. Can we go ahead and make one?
Or just even genre mashups, baby. Slap them together and just see what happens.
They're talking about how they were brainstorming together to come up with this idea. And it's of course you put the Tekken producer and the Soul Calibur producer in the same room. And they were like, let's make a fighting game. What else were they going to say? That's what they make.
Sudoku, but Pokemon themed.
I'd play that. That probably exists, actually.
Yeah.
A special controller for the game was also put on the market. Very similar to the controllers used on the arcade version of the game. Yes, that's right. Pokkén, the arcade version, does not use joysticks. It uses controllers. That is weird, but interesting. And also, apparently, we got a Pikachu version of this controller. It was a limited release, so limited that I didn't know it existed. Take what you will from that. And that's all the development information that I can find. That's it. I do have some reception facts, though, and also how successful it was financially and all that. Apparently, by November of 2015, there were already arcades that were beginning to talk about how they were planning to remove the game. And this was because, according to them, 1 credit could apparently last a player upwards of 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
That is so... Imagine going to an arcade and putting 1 credit into a cabinet and staying there for almost an hour. That is insane. Of course the game wasn't making money. This really slow turnaround time meant the game wasn't making any money. Because here's a little behind the scenes information for you about the arcade industry. Arcade games are hard and also move fast, because then that means more quarters go in, whether they be from you or other people go in fast. I'm sure everybody realizes that, but I just got to point that out. So an arcade game where 1 credit can last you almost an hour is severely less than ideal. So yeah, arcade version didn't seem to do great, but the Wii U version did a lot better, being the highest selling game in Japan the week that it debuted, with almost 70,000 copies sold, which ain't bad for a fighting game on the Wii U of all things. And also, apparently, Nintendo connected it to a huge increase in Wii U sales that week. The previous week, they had sold 4,000 units, and then the week that Pokkén came out, they reported 13,000 units had been sold. So, that's interesting. You wouldn't think that this would be the game that would push Wii U units, but what do I know, honestly, at this point? As for the Western release, its Metacritic for the Wii U version is currently at 76, and by the end of 2016, it had outsold Capcom's Street Fighter V, which, that's unfortunate.
It does show the power of the Pokemon brand, but it's certainly not what I would have expected.
Okay, sure, you could say it's a Pokemon game. Of course, it was going to outsell Street Fighter V. It was on the Wii U.
Yeah,
Wii U games didn't outsell anything. That's dire. As of August 2016, Bandai Namco reported that Pokkén had shipped over 1 million copies, and it was also nominated for Best Fighting Game at the Game Awards that year, but that seems to be the only award that it was really ever put up for at any point. Basically, this game, it's literally, as you said, it didn't set the world on fire. It's a good game, but it just sort of came and went, which is unfortunate, because it's very good. It did get a Nintendo Switch version, a re-release called Pokkén Tournament DX. It was released in September of 2017, And this version brought all of the arcade-exclusive Pokemon to the West for the first time, because all of those Pokemon added to the arcade version, we never saw, because we never saw the arcade version anywhere in the country.
Or yeah, not even as DLC on Wii U or anything like that, yeah.
Yeah. And it also added 3 new playable Pokemon, being Decidueye, Aegislash, and Blastoise as playable characters, as well as 3 new pairs of support Pokemon, being Litten and Poplio, Mew and Celebi, and my favorite, severely mismatched pair, Mega Rayquaza and Mimikyu.
Oh, bless them.
This version of the game was actually slightly higher reviewed, and it's currently sitting at a Metacritic of 79. And that is all the information I have for you on Pokkén Tournament. So let's talk about the main composer of Pokkén Tournament. He did a great job, and this is also going to be severely short. His name is Hiroki Hashimoto. I can't find anything on this man, and there's actually a very good reason this time. This is the first game that he was ever lead composer on. Ever. He started work in the industry in 2014, actually. He was also, IMDb also credits him as being in a documentary titled Otaku in 1994.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, this is his first and currently only outing as lead composer on any game currently, which is a shame because I think he did a good job. As for what game he debuted on in 2014, that would be Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, where he did all of the music for Smash Tour and Target Blast. And then in Ultimate, they finally gave him a chance to take a crack at remixing a song, and he did the remix of Mumbo's Mountain that was released a couple months ago alongside Banjo.
Yeah.
And then most recently, he also contributed to the soundtrack of Daemon X Machina. And that's it. That's his whole discography. So he's a new face in the industry. And if this soundtrack is any indication of his skill, I kind of hope he goes farther than he already has. Speaking of, he is not actually the only person that worked on this soundtrack. He is credited as the lead composer. I had to go and confirm that. I found it on he's the top one listed on Wikipedia. I had to go find him on VGMD to make sure that was his credits and everything. He is, but he also worked alongside a ton of other people on the soundtrack, including Hiroyuki Kawada, Ryo Hamamoto, Taku Inoue, Eriko Sakurai, Yoshinori Hirai, Takafumi Sato, Mitsuhiro Kitadani, Yu Sugimoto, and Shota Kageyama.
So that is interesting because I couldn't really tell if there was an official soundtrack release, but the one I did find seemed to be credited to, I guess, a couple different composers. We'll note one of them that is not the work of Hashimoto here, but the other ones did seem to be his work according to this credit. So if it's not, apologies, but I don't think there's any official full soundtrack release to back up the credits here.
Yeah, this is another one of this 3 in a row. Man, I sure know how to pick them. That just don't have any official release whatsoever. Luckily, fighting games are really easy to name the tracks because they're just usually named after the stages. And speaking of, let's get into those 5 critical tracks, shall we? Starting with Neos City. So I bounce between this and one other song on my top 5 as for which one is my favorite song in the game. Most of the time I think this one wins out. It's just this fantastic high energy electronic beat to it, and I think I've talked in the past about how sometimes I have like, I'll hear a song and then I'll write a scene in my head for something around that song. And then I'll write something else around that scene in my head. This is one of those songs. I could picture this song showing up in like a training montage.
Yeah.
And something that I would very much still like to produce one of these days, a Pokemon related thing. Probably never will because it's Pokemon, but it's still something I would like to do. And that's always what I've pictured this song belonging in. It's just like a training montage of some sort.
For this to be the first song that I've heard and that the listeners get to hear about the Pokkén Tournament soundtrack, it's an earworm. Like, it's a good bop to it. And I think it's a really good representation of like, one of the better songs in this collection.
Yeah, this is absolutely... in fact, I'll go ahead and say it. It's my favorite song in the game. It's great. I don't remember anything about the stage.
It is not mine, but it'll be coming up.
Ah, I see. Well, let's get closer to it, if not there, because I don't actually know which one, so this is exciting for me, too. With our second critical track, Tellertown, Autumn. This is the one on the list that we found out that is not composed by Hashimoto. This was actually composed by Shota Kageyama. So that's the one we know for sure. That violin solo, though. It's so good.
When you have those runs, those really fast runs, like that's always super impressive.
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't sound like a MIDI violin either. I might be wrong.
Oh, I'm sure it's a real performance, yeah.
And it's so good. And like violins like this are not something you hear very often in like techie sort of fighting games, I feel like. At least I can't think of an example of that. Like you'll hear strings all the time. Like orchestras are a big part of fighting game soundtracks nowadays, but I don't think I've ever heard something like this.
And yeah, it's good to see Shota Kageyama here. He also does composing on the mainline series of games. At this point, I think he had some in X and Y in particular. But yeah, so it's good to get a traditional Pokemon composer like in here to make some contributions. It
is really cool. Like, I bet you that's not a project he thought he'd ever be able to work on.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. I wonder if he's a Tekken fan. Anyways, let's get on to our third critical track, Haunted House. This is the home turf of the ghost Pokemon, so Chandelure and Gengar, unless I'm forgetting somebody else out of that, and I guess Aegislash at that point. This sounds like kind of like something I'd hear in a modern Castlevania, I feel like, almost. Personally. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but like, it has like a mix of electronic parts to it, and it's just this great mix of spooky, but also like fighting energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting mixture, and I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, and you hear it, and it's like, well, yeah, obviously this is a haunted house battle track. Like, it's always good when you have kind of like a feeling of what like should be there on a stage, and like this captures it just perfectly.
The theremin helps.
Ah, yes.
Theremin always helps it sound extra spooky. After that, our fourth critical track, Probably the one that wrestles with me for my favorite all the time between that and Neo City. We're going to the Magikarp Festival. This is probably among the most popular songs in the game, like by far. And this song is so cool. Like this traditional Japanese sound and then the electronic elements mixed in with it. And it's just this really high energy, fantastic song. And like of all the Pokemon to be associated with, it's associated with Magikarp. And this song is so good.
Yeah, I definitely would not have associated it with Magikarp. But there was a time when like Pokemon marketing was definitely all about pushing Magikarp. So yeah, I wonder. Now it is a classic. It's a good one. Especially for this game. Like I feel like I've heard this one before. If I had heard a track, or at least people talking about Magikarp Festival.
This is usually the one people talk about when they talk about Pokkén music. Most of the time. I think Neo City is like second place in most popular track, but this one, like with a bullet, is the one everybody knows.
The next one is my favorite song on this list, though.
Well, then let's jump right into it, because our fifth critical track is Dragon's Nest. This song is intense.
Boy, is it.
Like, this sounds like it should be the finale of the whole game, and it's not. It's just a stage. Just a regular stage. Like, those heavy drums and those really intense strings. Like, song is super good.
I flipped to this one, and it's just like, are you kidding me with how this sounds for a Pokkén Tournament game? Like, holy cow. And I feel like you'd appreciate this. I get the sense, like, immediately that this is like two dragons from Yakuza 0.
A little bit. I could hear it. Yeah. It's so good. And it, like, again, I want to reiterate, this is just a stage. This is not some climactic boss fight or anything. It's just a stage where I think a Dragonite shows up in the background. Maybe a Rayquaza. I don't know. I don't remember how it looks. I don't remember how most of the stages look, except for the haunted house, because it's got a swinging chandelier, and I always thought that was funny. And Ghastly shows up in the background. I like Ghastly.
All I know is this song sets my ear on fire. Ears, I guess. I do have two.
Allegedly.
But it's really, really good. I'm really happy to hear it.
It's fantastic. As for tracks on the cutting room floor, I have two to bring here. The first being Mystery Carnival. This song has so much whimsy to it. Like, it's so whimsical that it's almost ridiculous.
We better have like Mr. Mimes here, because it's like clowns.
I feel like Mr. Mime does show up on this stage, but again, like, I'm realizing that I don't remember any of the stages except for the other cutting room track and the haunted house. That's it. And maybe the Magikarp Festival, because it's fairly self-explanatory what Pokemon shows up in the background of that stage. I would hope. It's Gyarados. And Magikarp. But also, hey, am I alone in saying that I would never go to a thing called the Mystery Carnival?
Oh God, no.
Ever? That sounds like the start of a horror movie, and I will not be party to that. My other cutting room floor track is Power Training Gym. See, this one I remember, like, Sock and Throw show up in the background of this one. A couple other fighting type Pokemon. Like, maybe the Hitmon show up in the background of this stage. Still not enough, does not sate my hunger for them, but, you know, maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know why I like this song so much, but it's just this nice upbeat piece that I could totally picture playing while somebody was working out, I guess.
Definitely good bouncing energy here. Yeah, like, yeah, if you're lifting weights or whatever, put it on at the gym, you know, after you listen to this podcast, of course.
Yeah. Wait until you're done with the podcast, and then you can put on whatever song you want. So what will I never forget about Pokkén Tournament? Not much, honestly. It's seeming. I think the game is super fun and very good. I actually, while researching, I had a hankering to I want to go play Pokkén now, but I never bought the Switch version. So I would have to go dig out my Wii U version, and I'm not really in a hurry to go do that. So obviously I didn't want to play it that bad.
Right.
But really, still, I'm going to reiterate, there's not even one Hitmon in this game. Really? Hitmonchan would have been so cool. Boxing is like a central traditional archetype for fighting games. I can only dream. I might buy the Switch version at some point. Give it a shot. But it's not really on the top of my list of games that I need to buy, if that makes sense. So, for our transitions, we like to highlight a fan remix or cover, whether that be from OC Remix, YouTube, Dwelling of Duels, if that site is still around. I should check. And for me, I managed to find a remix of Neo City. So I was bouncing between all of the remixes were of Neo City or Magikarp Festival with literally no in between. And I bounced between this and a Magikarp Festival remix, but this one out, it's by YouTuber Dasgust, Dasgust. So please enjoy that, and we will be right back.
All right, so let's go from a fighting game spin-off to the game that started it all. Obviously, we've been talking about Pokemon for a while now here with, talking about Pokkén Tournament and whatnot. But if you somehow don't know what Pokemon is, it's one of, if not the biggest franchises in the world.
It is, in fact, the highest grossing media franchise on Earth.
Yeah. So it's kind of a big deal if you somehow have never heard of Pokemon. Or if you want to call it Pokemon or Pokemans or all that stuff, you're probably pretty aware of what Pokemon is. It was originally conceived as capsule monsters, but that kind of ran into some trademark issues, even though they were trying to come up with possible names like Kapumon or depending if it's a C or a K to start Kapumon. Eventually, though, the name Pocket Monsters stuck. And then Pokemon was born. As you mentioned, a recent study did peg it as the highest grossing media franchise at approximately $92 billion. Jeez. That's a lot of money. Originally, Pokemon Red and Green were released in Japan on February 27th, 1996 for Game Boy. Now these days, especially with social media and marketing and things like that, we generally like to recognize February 27th as Pokemon Day, when the company tries to, cater news specifically about Pokemon on that day. But several months later in Japan, a blue version was released in Japan. And this was apparently a mail order only special edition. It featured updated in-game artwork and new dialogue. So then it took 2.5 years from that February 27th, 1996 release for Pokemon to make its way to the West. Pokemon Red and Blue, which is what we'll be talking about today for my section here. Red and Blue released in North America on September 28th, 1998 for Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Europe would have to wait longer still, and that released there on October 5th, 1999. Pokemon Red and Blue, developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo. What is Pokemon Red and Blue? It's a JRPG, Japanese role-playing game, with a top-down third-person perspective. Players capture and battle monsters to become the strongest trainer in the land. A lot of people like to consider it, baby's first JRPG, but it has plenty of the genre staples here and there with, random encounters, experience points, levels, turn-based combat, just the whole thing there. In battle, monsters have up to 4 techniques at their disposal to try to whittle down an opposing monster's hit points. And then a Pokemon's type must be considered, because there's this whole rock, paper, scissors-like mechanic that the series is especially known for. If you've heard the phrase, "It's super effective," that's from Pokemon there, where you've chosen a type of attack that your opponent's Pokemon type is weak to. So, double damage, things like that. It's a whole bunch of math and numbers involved in the combat for Pokemon, but it all works out. The plot for Pokemon Red and Blue, the game takes place in the Kanto region, which is based off of Japan's real Kanto region. The player is beginning their journey as a trainer, and they must choose a starting creature to take with them as their first Pokemon. You have the Grass-type Bulbasaur, the Fire-type Charmander, and the Water-type Squirtle to choose from. Now you'll have a rival character who will choose the monster that is strongest against yours. In order to become the strongest trainer in the land, the Pokemon League champion, trainers have to collect 8 badges from strong gym leaders across the land. And then you have to beat the strongest Elite 4 trainers. All the while, you have this nefarious criminal organization called Team Rocket, who are attempting plans to steal rare Pokemon, so the player must thwart those along his journey. So the real question is, can you become the Pokemon League champion? Can you become a Pokemon master? Joe, what are your experiences with Pokemon Red and Blue?
I've never played any of Gen 1.
Really?
Ever, and I never will. I started on Gen 2 as a kid. My first Pokemon game was Pokemon Crystal. And by the time I was able to play Gen 1, we had pretty much unanimously come to the conclusion of, those games aged like milk. I've also surprisingly never beaten Fire Red and Leaf Green, though I have played them. I will be playing those for Smash Pieces, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. But no, I've never played Red, Blue. I've never played Yellow. Just never touched them.
That is interesting. Certainly the whole hook with the Johto games with Gen 2 is that, you get to go back to Kanto and you can play through that as well.
I watched the anime, so I knew where those places were and who those people were, so it still had that effect on me.
And yeah, of course you got the gist there, certainly. This was my first video game that I owned. So it means a whole lot to me. I had Blue. Hold on, I might be able to get it right now. Before I fall over and break things. Here we go. Pokemon Blue.
Yeah.
I put stickers on my game, so it's a Dratini, or it's a Dragonair. Oh my gosh, I even have Silver. Shout out to Silver. That's the best one.
Oh, Crystal, come on.
I know they had like animated, GIFs for the Pokemon moving. It was really cool at the time. I get you. But yeah, so Pokemon Blue is really important to me, just because of getting me started in my video game collection. And I've always said in the past that, like, I was 10 years old in 1998. And boy, when the anime came out, when the game came out, 10-year-old Ash Ketchum, like, boy, it hit me just right. Like that, I've been hooked for years. Absolutely.
So now we have, at this point now, done both of our first games ever. I did DK64, and you're doing Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as games owned, because I definitely played games before that. I've
same.
I've referenced Sonic 2 as like the first game I remember playing. But yeah, for first games owned, like they're special. Yes, absolutely. So the concept of Pokemon and what Pokemon actually are, it famously stems from the hobby of insect collecting, which is a popular pastime that inspired game designer Satoshi Tajiri as a child. Time passed, urbanization, especially in Japan, meant less insects, and kids were playing more indoors instead of outside. So Tajiri thought that this idea of insect collecting or collecting creatures would make for a good video game. And he thought that kids could relate with Pokemon by individually naming them, and then I guess apparently controlling them to represent fear or anger as a good way to relieve stress. I had never thought of it that way, but okay. People always say it's cockfighting, Pokemon, killing each other for sport. And that's really something that Satoshi Tajiri is very touchy about. He didn't want to fill the gaming world with pointless violence. So this is why Pokemon never bleed. They don't die in battle. They only faint. And I feel like that was maybe the only way my parents let me play Pokemon.
See, my parents still thought, or my mother still thought, that Pokemon was too violent, despite all that.
You poor soul.
I couldn't watch Power Rangers.
Well, I couldn't either, so that's different. I get you there at least. That's the martial arts. That's different, right? Of course, having the game be on Game Boy had the link cable where you could connect two Game Boys. You eventually got infrared on Game Boy Color. Oh my gosh, what technology! But a wire to connect two Game Boy units to trade and battle among friends. It made the Game Boy a perfect choice for Pokemon.
I can't imagine where else they would have put it, honestly, though.
It's true. Like at the time, I mean, there wasn't too much else, especially if they were looking for a portable system. I mean, what else were you going to do? I learned some interesting things about the development of the original Red and Green, ultimately Red and Blue. So here goes. Development of Pokemon Red and Green took almost 6 years. It's a long time in the video game industry.
That would be unheard of today for most studios.
Mm-hmm. Studios wouldn't even survive. But apparently Game Freak survived by having its members do like side projects for other companies just to make ends meet. Even remarking that they never really considered themselves necessarily a company at the time. They felt like they were almost more like a college club or something, where people who were interested would just gather or hang out. Like they didn't have, set schedules to be at work. They're just making things happen. But when they got closer to finishing Pokemon Red and Green, there was concern about the game's launch because it was coming and approaching the back end of the Game Boy's life cycle. So it's like, is this the right platform to still release it on here in 1996. There was also a moment where all of the game's data was almost lost during development.
Yeah, one of those.
One of those. Can you imagine how different the world would be if that data was deleted, lost to time, and Pokemon never, ever became a thing?
Not even slightly.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely wild. It was revealed in 2018. It was Junichi Masuda who said, quote, "We were developing the game on those Unix computer stations called the Sun Spark Station 1. We're developing, and there are these Unix boxes, and they crashed quite a bit. Back then, computers would crash fairly frequently. Somewhere midway through the development, maybe in the 4th year or so, we had a really bad crash that we didn't know how to recover the computer from. That had all of the data for the game, all of the Pokemon, the main character, and everything. It really felt like, oh my god, if we can't recover this data, we're finished here. I just remember doing a lot of different research. I called the company that I used to work for, seeing if they had any advice to recover the data." So obviously, they did. They did recover it. Like, I think it was a question that was like, well, what are some of your favorite memories working on? He's like, well, I mean, it was a lot of work, but there was this story. And it's like, holy crap, that's amazing.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine, like, the anxiety that probably caused. I'm anxious just thinking about it.
After 4 years of work,
And it's just gone?
and after you recover it, there's still like another 2 years of work. Oh my god, I can't. I just can't. When Masuda was reflecting about how when the game was releasing and how they were trying to judge how popular it was, he said, quote, "In Japan, the games came first. It spread in popularity through word of mouth primarily. It wasn't until later when you started seeing, okay, there's going to be an animated series. Okay, there's going to be a card game. Now there's a weekly manga publication. When those things expanded into this multimedia thing in Japan, we really started to feel like, oh wow, this is a big deal now." And so yeah, it only blossomed from there. Because you're right, yeah, there was an anime. There was a card game. Just made tons and tons of money, obviously.
Multiple mangas.
Oh yeah.
One I think is still going. Like Pokemon Adventures, I believe, is still going.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. Localization, though, was apparently a whole other deal. A small team led by Hiro Nakamura went through each of the 151 Pokemon and renamed them for a Western audience. They trademarked each one so that they could stay exclusive to the series. Like, wow. And apparently, they discovered that through the translation process, it became apparent that simply altering the game's text from Japanese to English was impossible.
Oh no.
And so the games had to be entirely reprogrammed from scratch.
Oh no.
Due to the fragile state of the game's source code, which may have explained just, the unusually long development time and, the patchwork state that they were in. So Red and Blue themselves were apparently based on the more modern Japanese version of Blue. They kind of modeled the programming and artwork based off of that one, but kept the distribution of Pokemon found in the original Red and Green the same.
The fact that they reprogrammed the game explains a lot. If you've ever seen a Pokemon Red or Blue speedrun, they break that game in half. That game is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually incredible. They're incredible to watch.
For sure. And it also explains why it took 2.5 years to come to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, if you had to do all of that from scratch, oh my goodness. So when it did come to the West, like with this, sort of strategy of how to expand the brand overseas, the idea was sort of concocted that the animated series should release first, like a few weeks before the game comes out to kind of gain that brand awareness. And then you'd release the games. Wow, did that work? That's how they got me for sure. But apparently Nintendo also allegedly spent $50 million at the time to promote the game. And they feared that it might not be popular with children. But, I guess ad money works too. So yeah, it's always interesting to hear, like, when there's those doubts there, and oh boy, were they wrong? But also, the strategy of putting the anime first, like, totally worked here for sure.
Genius, absolutely genius.
Players today know the original main character and his rival by the names of Red and Blue, or Ash and Gary.
If they're wrong.
If they'd like to follow the anime dub from 4Kids and all that. But the characters were originally named Satoshi, after Satoshi Tajiri, and Shigeru, after Nintendo's Miyamoto. So I don't know if there was like any real rivalry between the two, but I always found that interesting.
For some reason, I knew that Red's Japanese name was Satoshi, but I had no idea that Blue's was Shigeru. I had no clue.
Yep, Shigeru Okido. So that would be the Gary Oak equivalent. And if you think about it, like, taking Satoshi and turning it into Ash is not that big of a stretch. But neither is Shigeru, Gary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, connections being made there. So anyway, also shouts out to Green, or some people may know her as Leaf. This was a character that was originally envisioned by artist Ken Sugimori, who was like the designer of the actual Pokemon creatures. But he drew this piece of concept art on the game's strategy guide, where it's these 3 trainers that he wanted this idea of, like, I want these trio of characters squaring off with all of those starter Pokemon. And you had Satoshi, you had Shigeru, and the back of this girl's head, just this girl character. And so people would say, well, Red, Blue, and so she must be Green. Green or Leaf would be later recognized in future games, starting with being the female playable character option in the Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes. Pokemon Red and Blue, Red and Green, however you want to talk about it, one of the most important games of all time. Oddly enough, like, if you look at, old review, rankings back in the day, I guess Game Rankings was like maybe a Metacritic thing before Metacritic. I have a review average at about 88%. But yeah, this started a worldwide phenomenon. Like, it kind of opened more people to JRPGs beyond just, Final Fantasy VII. And, turned the world upside down with Pokemon, honestly.
There is a point where I'm pretty sure my great-grandmother at some point knew what a Pikachu was.
Oh yeah.
You couldn't not see Pokemon everywhere you went. Everywhere. It was insane. Like, I can't think of a way to explain it to people who didn't grow up in that era, which I know makes me sound like an old person in a rocking chair on a porch. I know. But, like, legitimately, I don't know how to describe just how prevalent Pokemon was at its peak. It was huge. It was inescapable.
It was unbelievable. It was something I don't know if we'll ever honestly see again, like, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I really don't think we will, honestly.
Pokemon Red and Blue, and, all of the versions, the red, green, Japanese blue, all that, it combines to be the 7th best-selling game of all time. Easily the best-selling RPG. Over 47 million copies have been sold. And it lives on because, it obviously started the whole Pokemon phenomenon. You did have a special edition yellow version of the game that really capitalized on Pikachu's popularity, as well as kind of borrowed different aspects from the anime. But it was essentially an enhanced version of Red and Blue. Released in Japan in 1998, North America in 1999, and Europe in 2000. Red and Blue were remade for Game Boy Advance as Fire Red and Leaf Green in 2004. So that may have seemed weird at the time for some people. Oh, it's Red and Blue, but why is it Fire Red and Leaf Green? Well, if you're trying to go back to, Red and Green, especially when you're thinking the Japanese audience as well, that kind of makes sense why. But yeah, 2004 for Game Boy Advance. You also had Twitch Plays Pokemon, specifically playing Pokemon Red in 2014, which became a phenomenon where on Twitch, a community chat sort of bot program allowed the community to try to control and beat Pokemon Red, ultimately doing so with many memes and laughs along the way. That was certainly a Twitch phenomenon at the time involving that game. You also had Red, Blue, and Yellow appear on the 3DS eShop on Pokemon Day, February 27th in 2016. And then ultimately, the Kanto region was re-envisioned with modern game design and some influence from a very popular mobile game, with Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu, and Eevee in 2018 on Nintendo Switch. We're, of course, talking about this, as we mentioned before. The 8th generation of the main series of Pokemon games begins with Pokemon Sword and Shield, out this week on Friday, November 15th, 2019, on Nintendo Switch.
And I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I'll get it. I'm not crazy about the whole, the conversation about the Dexit and all that garbage. Like, I'm going to play it. I'm part of the problem. Okay, fine.
Yeah, same. I'm absolutely part of the problem.
You got me. All right. I've bought everyone, so I'm going to get this one too.
Anybody that was born in the time when the game, like before the game came out, like at a certain range of years, like, because remind me what year you were born.
1988.
And I was born in 92. So like that range there, maybe a couple years after that, as long as you were able to read by 98, it's your curse now. This is the curse you keep forever. If you kept on with video games.
Yeah, especially if you were a kid. Right? Like you're hooked for sure. So I've mentioned Junichi Masuda already. Junichi Masuda is a man who's born on January 12th, 1968 in Yokohama, Kanagawa Prefecture in Japan. Junichi Masuda is known today as the longtime director of the main series of Pokemon games, starting with Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. He decided that Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee would be his last game that he would direct. He actually didn't direct Sun and Moon, though, which was right before, which is interesting. But he's also like the face of the franchise on Japanese TV. So like generally when someone is representing the Pokemon brand, it's Junichi Masuda. So while he may be this, directorial figure and, kind of public face of Pokemon, when the series started with Red and Green, Junichi Masuda was the composer at Game Freak. And he was also one of the 2 programmers on the game. Junichi Masuda had his family vacation in Kyushu, which is Japan's southernmost island. And they did so when he was a kid. I guess many relatives of his still live there. But he spent time catching fish and insects. So, boy, doesn't that sound familiar. Apparently, when he got to direct Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the Hoenn region is inspired by Kyushu. And it's like Masuda's attempts to try to recapture his past summer memories. We're talking about, his music influences and him becoming a composer and all that. He primarily likes to compose and play on piano, but he played the trombone in high school. And he really discovered classical music and works like Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring and Dmitri Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5. He attended the Japan Electronics College, which is a technical school in Shinjuku, Tokyo, where he studied computer graphics and the C programming language. And so when the company of Game Freak was created in 1989, he worked there ever since. So he's one of the original team members, and he was hired to compose video game music. The first game project he worked on was a game called Mendel Palace, which is a 1989 puzzle game for the NES. With being inspired by classical music and composers like Shostakovich, that's kind of where his music's inspired by, but I guess his favorite music genre is techno, and he apparently uses the Super Mario series as kind of an inspiration, as a model of what good video game composition is. Currently, he serves on Game Freak's board of directors, and because he directed Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, he also had his daughter Kiri born in 2002, which was right before the game came out. So Masuda named a character in Ruby and Sapphire after Kiri. She is an NPC in Totopolis City, and she gives the player 2 berries every day that the player decides to talk to her. So that's pretty interesting. And a lot of different, Masuda's favorite Pokemon out there, but I've heard a lot of reports that his favorite Pokemon is Psyduck. So I'm sure he has a lot of favorites, but I guess Psyduck is among them. So I found that interesting as well. So when it comes to Masuda's discography, especially when it comes to composing, early days of Game Freak, he composed on Yoshi, Mario and Wario, and Pulseman. But certainly, Pokemon's the big one. If you wanted to talk about, one Pokemon composer, we've talked about Go Ichinose before, especially with, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and all that. But, Masuda's the original one for the first 2 generations. And yet, so that'd be, Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal. So, obviously, games that mean a lot to both of us. Songs that mean a lot to both of us. And he apparently also composed for Pokemon Go, another game that became massively, massively popular.
I remember that being a big deal, too, when they announced that he was working on Go, because I don't think anybody expected that.
Right, yeah, I mean, he was directing games and things like that. But here's the deal. Despite all of his, directorial contributions to the Pokemon series and all that, a lot of those battle tracks in those games, that's still Junichi Masuda. So, if you wonder why a lot of those battle tracks, they sound pretty similar. They have that really good vibe to them. That's all Masuda. He still, contributed in that sense. Yeah, sure, other composers would do the town themes and the route themes and all that. But, Masuda is the Pokemon battle genius in that sense for composing those tracks. When it comes to notes on Pokemon Red and Blue's soundtrack, you do have to remember that, the Game Boy only has 4 audio channels. So when you hear these tracks and it's they sound more simplistic than I remember. Well, yeah, it was on a Game Boy. I know we've talked about a couple Game Boy titles, Super Mario Land, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. We're kind of going back into that territory and kind of tapping that well a little bit.
It's also why, if you remember during a battle, when a Pokemon comes out and does its cry, the music cuts out. That's why.
Yep, that's absolutely why. You kind of need those channels at your disposal. So, Masuda composed the music at his home apparently on a Commodore Amiga computer, which I guess only features PCM sample playback. And then because of his programming knowledge, he was able to convert the music that he had written to Game Boy with a program he had written himself. So that's interesting. You mentioned the cries, and it's really important to stress that Masuda's responsible not only for creating Pokemon Red and Blue's music, but also all of the sound effects. And this does include the cries for every single Pokemon. And if you're not sure what we're talking about when we say, a Pokemon's cries, I have to recount a story from my youth where, we go through the Pokédex and, look at the different monster entries. And there was an option that said cry. And, being a kid, we're like, I don't want to make the Pokemon cry.
I think I remember you telling this story at some point.
Yeah. So eventually, it's just okay, I want to know what it does. Oh, that's it. And it's just the noise that the monster makes in game when being released from the Pokeball. But again, just to think of, the limitations of the Game Boy at the time to create something unique for each and every, although I should say there, I think, was it Charizard and Rhyhorn sound really similar?
I believe they're the same.
Yeah, really similar, if not the same. So, but for the most part, unique sounds for every creature. It's just amazing.
Some of them are like iconic. I used to have the Zubat cry as my ringtone.
Oh God.
And like that's one that anybody that's played Pokemon can pull out in a second. Like it's I think that's probably the king of like that or Rattata. The
or Pidgey's.
That's also really, yeah. My favorite is still Snorlax with the
Yeah, or oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. Like there's a lot of different ones that just kind of come to mind. Jinx, I think that one was.
That's Jinx. Yeah.
Yep. But it's just yeah. So like these kind of carry over throughout time, throughout Pokemon. And it's just amazing to think of. They were created by Junichi Masuda. When asked what his favorite track was throughout the whole of the Pokemon series, Junichi Masuda's favorite track, he says, is the opening to Pokemon Red and Blue. Which you can tell, like, that kind of sounds like a march, kind of sounds like a snare drum. No, that's just using white noise very cleverly. But yeah, that's main theme and da 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 da. Like that just carries over throughout Pokemon. It's just a classic theme.
One of these days, one of us, I'm sure, will bring Sun and Moon because that game has a fantastic soundtrack.
Oh yes.
But the champion battle for that game starts with the da 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 da, and I get emotional every time I hear it because like it feels like sort of it's a throwback, obviously, and like it's the type of throwback that like really makes me emotional when I hear it.
Yeah, it's like coming home. Yeah, absolutely. Masuda also says he's really fond of the effort he put into, he said, the Pewter Town theme, but this is, for Pewter City and Viridian City. Which is just another classic. So many of these songs are just so good, and I'm looking forward to gushing about them. In that same interview, he also said that he's proud of Cynthia's battle theme, which we did cover that song on our previous Pokemon Diamond and Pearl episode. So let's get into those 5 critical tracks with how do you whittle this down, honestly. So difficult, but I think maybe the best place to start is Battle Wild Pokemon. Look, I think the intro is just incredible. The way it represents you are getting into a random battle encounter kind of chaos of the battle. But just like think of all the tones that need to be created in that sequence to make it sound like that. Just fantastic. And then these Flight of the Bumblebee like runs. Like, oh my gosh, like imagining trying to play that on an actual instrument gives me anxiety. We talked the violin, like doing some of those for the solo, the da 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 da, like just imagine it's, oh my goodness.
And there are probably people that can do it too.
I'm sure absolutely, but it's much easier when it's programmed into the Game Boy's sound chip. But I would say like this is the track that players are going to hear the most in the game,
whether they want to or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so it's important. It's a classic, and I think that's definitely why it has to be here.
I agree that it has to be here. Eventually, we will get to the point where I bring the discourse, but that won't be until the cutting room floor when I will bring the discourse.
Trademark.
Do not steal. Yeah, this is, I think, just by virtue of being like, you're going to hear this a lot. And it's very good. Unfortunately, this is one of those. Pokemon sort of has an issue where I always come away from the game like I hate the wild Pokemon battle theme for like a month because I've heard it so much and I'm just sick of it. But for the first like few hours of a Pokemon game, I dig it. And this is definitely a really good one. And I just have a soft spot for the GBA, or the GBA. It's not the GBA. That would be a weird alternate timeline that we'd be living in. The GB, the Game Boy like sound chip and sound font is, I have a really soft spot for it because it's super good. These people were able to do so much with so little. And this song, like you said, the Flight of the Bumblebee stuff, like that's a really good example of it. I've told the story of how, like, in Gen 2, when you finally hit Kanto and it's a new wild Pokemon battle theme, it's this feeling of relief of, oh, God, thank you.
Yep. No, for sure. But, like, it's definitely an iconic song. I had to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Also iconic is number 2 on the Critical 5, Pokemon Center. I can't imagine a happier, cheerier piece of music. After all, it's free healthcare. Enjoy it.
I don't know what that means. I live in America.
It's a melody that has been sustained throughout the entire franchise. And yeah, even if you try to bring it to the region of Alola in Sun and Moon and they try to make it a luau kind of like it's a classic Pokemon melody.
It's also one of the few non-battle themes to make it into Smash.
True. It's just a really important song. And again, you're going to keep healing your Pokemon. You're going to hear this one a lot. The Pokemon Center is a very important place when you play that game. So yeah, it's a pretty critical one, I think. Number 3 on the Critical 5, Battle Gym Leader. Just the stakes here. You have more arpeggios if they're going like kind of just warbling between those. More runs. There's just all this tension. The piece goes through these, just moments of, uncertainty, but then also like triumph, like a fanfare. I think this piece is all over the place, but in the best way possible. Because like these battles actually matter. They're for those 8 gym badges, and it's a totally different sense of battle between all the wild Pokemon, between the trainers. Like this just takes it up to another level, and I think it's because of the range of moods that this piece invokes, but also really presenting the stakes, the importance of this battle. I personally really wanted to put it here.
It's a really, really good gym leader theme. It might actually be one of my favorites in the series.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. It's the tension of the dun, 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 dun. Like somehow the lack of sound makes it more tense than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And I do have to give a shout out to a well-known YouTube video called Gym Battle vs. Turkey. This is YouTube user Mautendu doing what he does best and taking different sounds and fitting it with different video game songs. His other work is stuff with Super Mario 64 and like Terry Crews and all that. But I love this one so much. Taking like those rubber chickens and matching it up with this gym battle song. It's one of my favorites. I love it. Number 4 on the critical tracks, Cycling. No other video game song, I think, expresses the idea of freedom so well. Like, getting on your bike and having that melody play out with 2 main melodic lines, and you suddenly can go much faster throughout the world. It's so liberating and just so joyful. But you also have, like, if you listen closely, like kind of these mechanical sounds. It's almost like a bike being pedaled, which I think that's really cool. Again, especially for the time. I don't know how I didn't mention it for all these songs yet so far, but hopefully you are enjoying the sense of panning and different audio channels that is definitely present in these different songs. Also, a big part of this soundtrack for sure.
So, I prefer the Gen 2 cycling song.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of my favorite songs in the franchise. Even though, all right, yeah, I know. It's just Goldenrod City sped up. I get it. I know. Look, I'm the first one that'll admit that. But it's a good song. I prefer it heavily. I'm not actually a huge fan of this cycling theme.
Oh, interesting.
And I apologize, Internet, but I don't. I mean, I like it. It's good. But, like, I don't know if I would have put it in the Critical 5, to be perfectly honest. But, like, that's why I'm not doing this part.
Yeah.
Also, because you called it.
Right. Right. I just remember, getting on the bike so often that this song was ingrained in my memory to the point where I have very fond memories of trying to learn how to play a saxophone duet version of the song with my friends. Thanks, MIDI, for transcribing things like that. But this was in high school that I was trying to do this. And like Gen 3 was already out by this point. But yet I'm going back to a song from Gen 1 because like it means that much to me. And I feel like it's really important, especially when you press select to hop on that bike.
Mm-hmm. And that's a mirroring of why I like the cycling theme in Gen 2.
For sure.
It's the exact same reasons.
But, different generations for different people. That totally makes sense. But a Critical 5 would not be complete for Pokemon Red and Blue without Lavender Town. Like, oh my gosh, can you just listen to, like, the dithering that's going on and the pitch warbling? Hands down, memes or otherwise, but if you want to even disregard those, just listening to this, it's the spookiest track ever created for the Game Boy.
I would agree with that. And there's a reason it became, like, a big thing in creepypasta and, like, yeah, whatever. But, like, it doesn't make sense that this town is left to forever be creepy. And then Gen 2 came in and ruined that. Gen 2 ruined Lavender Town. I love Gen 2, but boy, did it and also like made some really screwed up implications about what happened there after Gen 1 ended.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this song is I'm not even gonna say probably. This is the most famous town theme in the entire series.
Yeah.
Bar none.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever heard this song reversed?
I feel like I have before.
I'm gonna need you to put a sample of that in the episode right here. Because it actually sounds incredible reversed.
Yeah, it's man, it's something. And Lavender Town, for those that somehow don't know, it's a place where the Pokemon Tower exists, and it's a grave site for many Pokemon who have passed on from this world. So it's all about like ghosts and spooks and things like that. So totally fitting. And yes, Junichi Masuda may make incredible battle tunes, but this track is legendary. It's masterful.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get into the Discourse trademark. Tracks on the cutting room floor. Let's start with your 2.
All right. Where do you get off? How dare you? My first track on the cutting room floor is Battle vs. Trainer. How is this not on your list? This is me finally getting revenge for Mega Man 3, isn't it? When you called me out on Mega Man 3, now I get to do this, even though this is one song and not 2. This is, in my opinion, one of the most iconic battle themes in all of RPGs.
And you didn't even play Gen 1. What are you talking about? And you missed 2 songs from Mega Man 3. Honestly, the actual rationale here is that you can't load up Pokemon and top 5s here for the Critical 5 with so many battle songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so one's got to fall to the wayside. And if we're talking about frequency of songs, it was between Wild Pokemon and Trainer. And for me, Wild Pokemon is more iconic to the series, more frequent.
I would have gone the opposite.
Look, I love the remixes of Trainer more, not only with fan covers and things like that, but also what the anime did to this song. It's powerful. I really do enjoy that. But for me, Gym Leader needed to be there for the stakes, and then we had to mix in other non-battle songs. So, look, I'm glad you're covering it somewhere somehow. But you also didn't play Gen 1, so step off.
Hey, still though, this is like one of the best 8-bit compositions in history, in my opinion.
Look, so many of these are. Let's be real. Masuda's soundtracks for both Gen 1 and 2 are incredible, and we could do a critical 20 if we wanted to, but
100%.
Sometimes you just gotta make the tough choices.
All right, I'll concede, and thus ends the discourse.
Trademark.
So I guess I'll get into my my second cutting room 4 track, which is actually Celadon City. This is probably my favorite town theme in the game. Like, obviously, Lavender Town, that's the one that needed to go on the Critical 5. Mm-hmm. There's no debate about that one. But I just really like Celadon City. I love it a lot. It's very happy and bouncy and makes me smile, which means that it's propaganda to make me go shop at the department store. But hey, sometimes you just gotta do what the music tells you to do.
Celadon's probably my second favorite town theme, but Celadon City as a whole is my favorite town in Kanto. Like, just to explore, to be in, all the different things. Like, Grimers in a lake? What? What is that?
That always screwed me up as a kid. I never, like, understood that. And then as an adult, I was like, oh, the Earth is dying.
So, yeah, I'm glad that Celadon City is here. So I think, yeah, very good selections for the cutting room floor. Mine, I'll go with my favorite town theme, and that would be Vermilion City. Is part of it because electric type is my favorite? Possibly. But it's also like, I don't think there's any song that really represents like the open air of the sea quite like this song. And yeah, I'm looking at you, Cinnabar Island.
Cinnabar Island's music only gets good when it's gone.
And it's only good when, you know, you're doing the missing no glitch and all that, and you're surfing up and down the right coast. Like, I get it. But going to Vermilion City and hearing the energy in the song, it's a short loop, but it makes me really happy. It's my favorite music from a town in this game. The other one is Final Battle Rival. It's the game's most iconic battle, the most iconic moment. Sorry, spoilers for a late 1990s game. When you beat the Elite Four, you are no longer the champion, or you're just not the champion, because your rival, Shigeru, Gary, Blue, what have you, became the champion first, so you have to beat him to be the champion. So it's the climactic moment in the story, in the game. It's important. And it gets its own music. I think it may go a little overkill on the dramatics, but like it's still important to amp it up for sure. So I think it had to be recognized. I don't think it's a Critical 5 worthy song, but it's important to at least include in the discussion.
I think it's like, to me, one of the less memorable champion battle themes.
Yes,
but yeah,
yes.
no, I think having it in the cutting room floor, that's a very good place for it.
Yeah, like if we're talking about gold and silver, like Lance's Red's battle theme just like dumps all over it. It's like
it's so good.
That's one of the best Pokemon tracks of all time. Like, but so it's just really tough to compare the two from Gen 2 and Gen 1.
Mm-hmm.
What will I never forget about this game? Just it's right here. You know, my video game collection started with this. Like, it's kind of means a lot to me. So I'll never forget, you know, everything about that game. Like, really important, really sentimental. Just kind of started me on my journey of owning games and talking about games and all this, all because of a silly catch and battle game that became a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, it really says something when like it's a special game to me, and I never played it. Like that says something. Can you name a single other game that you can say that about?
No, and I feel like it's, you know, part of it is because it's a fraction of, you know, the game that means the most to you in that franchise.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on to our outro, I want to play a small, possibly depressing game. So Sword and Shield obviously has a thing of a lot of Pokemon didn't make it, which honestly, whatever. If you're one of the people on Twitter responding to every tweet from the Pokemon Company shouting "Bring back National Dex," go jump in a river. Not a high river, just, you know, get wet, because you deserve to be wet. What is your favorite Pokemon? And I will tell you if it made it into Sword and Shield. And then I can also possibly depress myself by saying my favorite Pokemon. This is also just an excuse to be like, what's your favorite Pokemon?
Yeah. My favorite Pokemon is Raichu, far and away. Pikachu is a scrub, not to evolve against Lieutenant Surge. Okay, you beat him with speed. Like, I get it, but Raichu is clearly the best. And Everyone should know that for a fact.
You picked yourself a safe pick.
Yep.
Because Raichu is absolutely in Sword and Shield, because there's no way they'd ever make a Pokemon game without Pikachu. That's impossible.
And then some people are going to be like, well, mine's Gorochu. And I'm like, all right, piss off.
Mine is Wooper.
It sure is.
And Wooper is in Sword and Shield. So we both get our favorite Pokemon.
Yay! Would your favorite type then be water and or ground?
I love water type Pokemon. I discovered this years ago when me and my friend Wolfgang played a race through Crystal. And by the time we finished, I realized like 4 out of 6 of my team are water types. I think I might like water type Pokemon. And it's held true ever since. If I was a gym leader, I would be using water type Pokemon.
Yeah, I would definitely be an electric type gym leader. Well, that will do it for this episode here on Original Soundchat. A full Pokemon themed slate of discussions. Always good stuff. Yeah, we're going to go buy Sword and Shield. Come on. Yeah, tell us we're part of the problem, but...
Are you getting Shield or Sword?
I am getting Shield.
I'm getting Sword. Hey.
Trading buddies.
Gotta need one of those Ponyta.
But yeah, obviously, as you said, don't harass anybody on Twitter about that. Like, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Sure, will a new version come out, a sequel that does have the national dex? Yeah, assuredly.
Probably.
Sometime. But, that's future us problems. So you can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at TheDobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. Also home to Smash Your Pieces. Great podcast that you got going on there. Joe, Final Fantasy VII. That must be a whole lot of fun to work through.
So far, yes. We'll see if it continues that. I don't think we're halfway through the game.
Also you can find the MP3 podcasts, of course, by going to different podcast storefronts all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, anywhere you get your podcasts, search Original Soundchat there. You can also interact with the show on social media at Soundchat OST. So leave us feedback on how we're doing with these episodes. Give us suggestions for games that you'd like us to play. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. The Spotify playlist, it continues to grow and be just a massive collection of music that I flip through and eat up so much data on my phone plan per month. That's my mistake. I should download it on Wi-Fi. But I'm guessing nothing is being added this week because of Nintendo games.
Nah, nothing. Pokemon Company tends to put all their stuff on iTunes, but they don't seem to have moved on to Spotify yet. So you can buy the Red and Blue soundtrack on iTunes, but you can't get it on Spotify, unfortunately.
They'll get there eventually, I'm sure. We'll get to more bonus tracks soon. I think now that we're kind of hitting back to a lull again, that hopefully should help things. We got another interview still waiting in the wings here to edit and stitch together. And then by year's end, we should have something also pretty nice for you, I think. We have a Q&A coming up for our Thanksgiving episode. So if there's anything you'd like to ask us, whether it's game music related or not, ask us about Thanksgiving food. I don't know. We can go on a discussion about that. Anything is on the table there. Get your questions in now so that we can answer them for a Thanksgiving Q&A episode. That'll be on the week of Thanksgiving and Black Friday and all that stuff when that releases.
I want to give a quick shout out to Desert Bus for Hope, which is going on right now. In fact, at time of release, it's probably wrapping up today or tomorrow. Because we're obviously recording this a few days in advance. But they are my favorite charity stream that happens every year. It's the people over at Loading Ready Run. They sit down and play the most boring game ever made, ever, for as long as people keep giving them money. And they busk and do things for your entertainment. It's a great thing to just have on in the background. Definitely go check them out. Give them some eyes on their stuff. Give them some money if you are so inclined. They're raising money for Child's Play Charity, which is a charity that buys video games and toys and stuff for children's hospitals so that the kids stuck there have something to do. It's a very good charity that is very close to my heart. So yeah, absolutely go check that out at twitch.tv/desertbus.
A very good thing to plug, and it's definitely a great stream for sure. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I will be talking about Norihiko Hibino.
I will finally be talking about Hideyuki Fukasawa.
For real this time.
Almost talked about him for Street Fighter V. We're going to talk about him for real this time. To play us out, we had to talk about Poke Remix Studio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my goodness, one of the best Pokemon remixers out there on YouTube.
May he rest in peace.
I wish he did more things, newer things, but his great work lives on. And I think when it comes to representing tracks from this game, I'll give you the nod here, and we'll pick from Poke Remix Studio, Trainer Battle.
I am sated.
It's a great piece. Hope you all enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.